welcome everybody. My name is Greg Shove, and I'm joined this morning by Scott Galloway and Jaime Teevan, Microsoft's chief scientist. Welcome. Scott's in London, Jaime's in Seattle. I'm in Palo Alto in Northern California. A little bit about Section. We help people and teams turn AI hype into ROI for themselves personally, for their team, for their organization. We've helped 25,000 employees upskill in AI in the last 2 years, and we have 100 enterprise customers for whom we are helping them create this transformation in their workforce, going from employees that are novice and anxious about AI and turning them into confident and proficient in AI. In terms of how today's going to work, as you know, if you know Section, we promise 60 dense, high-calorie minutes of AI insights and conversation. We ask of you that you pay attention if you can. Don't multitask too much. Ask good questions. Share your knowledge in chat, and please don't self-promote. It's the one thing that you ask us to manage, which is people who are promoting. So if you promote in chat, we'll kick you out. So don't do it. In terms of our participants today, you know Scott, and besides co-host of Pivot, co-host of his own podcast, has a new book coming out, Thoughts on Being a Man. I think, is that right, Scott? Is that the title?
Notes on Being a Man.
Notes on Being a Man. Thank you. Available soon in the next month or so?
September. Thanks,
September.
Greg.
Okay, later this year. And the founder of Section, Jaime, chief scientist and technical fellow at Microsoft, and led the integration of AI initially with OpenAI technologies into the core products at Microsoft, including 365 Copilot, and leads the future of work research and the recently published version for this year, which we'll talk a little bit about today, recognized by Time as one of the most 100 influential people in AI. So welcome both of you. Before we start, I do want to make a pitch for Prof AI. Prof AI has been in development for over a year. We released it in beta about a month ago. Thousands of people have completed their certification in terms of their AI proficiency. It's an AI coach that teaches you AI. I want to pitch it because companies pay, but consumers don't. So if you need access to Prof AI as an individual, or if you work at a nonprofit or a high school or a college, let us know and we'll give you free access to Prof AI. We want everybody to thrive in the age of AI. And the first step in that is becoming AI proficient. And Prof AI is a fun, personalized, fast way to get good at using LLMs. And we want you to get access at no cost. And it even issues you a LinkedIn badge to put on your LinkedIn profile if you pass. So let us know if you need access to Prof AI. Jaime, in a TED Talk I watched recently, you talked about sitting in a Microsoft conference room at headquarters, I guess, I think the summer of 2022, you were there, Satya was there, some other Microsoft execs, maybe Kevin Scott or someone like that. Sam Altman and Greg Brockman from OpenAI were there, and they basically gave you a demo of ChatGPT 4, I think. And you put it through its paces. And then you said you drove home, started to drive home, pulled over at a 7-Eleven and screamed. And then you went home and had a whiskey. So my first question was, it just one whiskey? And my second question is, why were you screaming?
You probably know the answer to the first question, at least. Yes, it was a couple of whiskeys. And I then put on Terminator 2 and watched that. It was complicated. I don't think I knew at the time why I was screaming. You know, sometimes you have an emotional reaction. It was clear that we were in the middle of a really pivotal moment. And so like a lot of it was, what did that mean? And what did it mean to know such a big change was coming and like be one of a small group? Actually, you know, so I was watching Terminator 2 and I cried at this really weird segment of the movie. I don't know if you remember the movie, but there's this time when like Sarah Connor goes to kill the guy. And this was me, like, just to be clear, I was very excited and hopeful, but like goes to kill the guy who's going to create the Terminator and ends up deciding not to. And the two of them sit and they just know this big change is coming. And there was something about that responsibility of knowing this big change is coming and like feeling all of the excitement and all of the like challenges associated with that. It was a really big feeling. And so I think that's what it was, sort of like a feeling that you couldn't hold inside.
So update us. Like, where are we now, and when do you expect to kind of want to scream again? You know what I mean? Like, and let's not talk about AGI, because I think AGI can kind of be a waste of time, basically.
Yeah. I don't find it an interesting.
Let's talk. Let's talk about, and
question.
Scott, hang tight while we do this. I want to kind of lay this foundation of where are we with these technologies in terms of, what's happening, how are they hitting the workforce, and sort of what's showing up for the workforce in terms of these technologies. Because Jamie, I sometimes think that AI is like a genius and a clown at the same time, and so I want to get your view on, does that ever change, and when do we get more genius than clown, or are we already? So what's happening right now?
I mean, so I don't expect additional scream moments. Like there is like that was a really big shift in that we're going to have a different interface in how we deal with computing, that we can use natural language, that we can engage in a stochastic manner rather than a deterministic manner. That was really the shift. And it takes a long time to realize a shift like that. And we're moving super fast, and as a world, and things are changing, and like we all make the joke of like AI time, and like, oh, that was last week, that's like 5 years in AI time. But like honestly, change just takes time. Like there's a lot to figure out, there's a lot of infrastructure to put in place, there's a lot of getting the technology right and setting that up, there's a societal change. And that's true, like historically, when electricity came into factories, it took 50 years to redesign the factories and figure out what that looks like. So I think that the work of all of us ahead for the next 50 years is figuring out what how this is shifting sort of everything that we do in a fundamental way. And that's going to take time. And we're going to be very uncreative and boring about it in the short term. And we're going to, we're going to look back at some point too. And this is going to be such a weird time where we're like, that wasn't obvious. We weren't doing that. I mean, already, if we look back 2 years ago, it's kind of, you're like, why did you scream? I don't get it. What was so, I mean, and I don't, that's me straw manning a little, but like,
Yeah.
what is that? Like we now take for granted that you can have a natural language conversation with a computer, but we don't, there's going to be a lot more that we take for granted that we don't even realize yet.
So as our technologist on this call, let's just sort of summarize with, are we on pace with what you expected from two or 3 years ago in terms of these capabilities, in terms of them improving and getting more potent?
Yeah, well, and I would say, I don't think like that AI is going to continue to get better. Like, large language models are going to get better. We're going to handle more modalities. We're going to figure out how to do things. But the real thing that's hard, and this is what I like, this is my responsibility, and our response, like, is the figuring out how to also embed it into work, to embed it into healthcare, embed it into education. What does it mean? In the like, there's basically a capability overhang, essentially, where the models have capabilities that we are not yet taking advantage of. So like, sure, the models have lots of, you talk about how they're dumb, and they're dumb in all sorts of ways that we can see and start to address. But the real challenge is figuring out how to take even the capabilities that exist. If development stopped this second on the actual underlying models, we'd still have the 50 years to figure things out.
All right. So let's flip the kind of coin around, Scott, from the perspective of the boardroom, investors, CEOs, where you spend a lot of time. What's the vibe there? What's your sense of their perspective on this moment? AI is genius, AI is clown, both, neither. What's the board think?
Start firing people and increasing my earnings using AI.
Yeah. So, okay. So your point of view is big tech is selling augmentation, but CFOs are buying replacement.
Google just announced a pretty big layoff and buyouts. They understand AI really well. I mean, we're all trying to pretend that this is, going to be great for everybody, and it doesn't make for an inspiring all hands to say, I've got good news. Our earnings are up, and I've got great news. I'm going to need fewer of you next quarter. That doesn't make for a good all hands. But yeah, I think pretty much every board is asking how they can become more efficient leveraging AI. And when the companies, I think of AI as corporate Ozempic. And that is Ozempic goes into your brain and kind of switches off a switch that says you don't need more calories, even though your instincts are telling you to consume as many calories as possible if you're fortunate enough to have salty or sugary or fatty food in front of you. And typically, when you're a CEO and you're growing, the signal is, I need more calories, I need more people. And must, to a certain extent, by offering a minimum viable product with 20% of the staff of Twitter and really meta announcing what was a seminal earnings call where they said, we've laid off 20% of our staff and meanwhile maintained growth of 23%, sending earnings up 70%. Everybody started thinking, I want the great taste of growth without the calories of more people. And AI is the Ozempic. And it's sort of, no, but CEOs don't want to say this out loud because it's really discouraging. But when Google, who arguably has more IP around AI than any organization in history, has looked across, I think, a 20,000 person strong, I forget what they call it, marketing or coding, and offered buyouts. It reminds me, when I was at the New York Times, we were constantly offering buyouts because we said, okay, this world is shrinking. And I think Google has said, look, we're going to need fewer of you, and we're going to be able to maintain our growth even with fewer of you. So what boardrooms are kind of quietly, or they're saying the quiet part out loud. They're like, all right, why do you need to continue hiring people? And can you come back to me for a plan over the next 12, 24, 36 months with 10, 20, 30% fewer employees while not sacrificing any growth? So this is, I see it mostly as productivity and earnings growth is what's being discussed in the boardroom right now.
Yeah, so I was expecting to get there after about 30 minutes, a little more warm-up conversation, but I'm glad we got there fast. So let's go there. So what should CEOs be saying? Because I get asked all the time, when we're asked to present to companies or their all hands or their management meeting, people often say, well, Greg, cut those slides out where you talk about the impact on the workforce. We don't want to talk about that. Management teams seem to be struggling with what should they be saying to their employees. You're right, it doesn't make for great all hands, but I don't think not talking about it works either. So, Scott, what are you advising CEOs to say in terms of, employees aren't stupid. Our workforces understand what's going on. What's your advice to CEO in terms of how they should be talking about this in terms of the impact on the organization?
Look, I think the truth has a nice ring to it. And, so I'm not on any public company boards right now. So I'm on smaller boards that are growing, and those folks are all over AI. What I'm telling, I run a small business, Prop 2 Media is like 18 full-time employees. And what I say to them, I assume that companies are here to establish economic security for them and their families. I don't build companies to turn people into social warriors or be better humans. I want you to make money so you can take care of your kids and your parents. And I have a very sober conversation you can do with this small company. I said, do you want to make more money the next year? And they'll usually say, yeah, I'd like to make more money. And I'm like, okay, well, do you want to make 10% more, 30% more, 50% more? And then outline a series of steps. All right, you're managing your producer on a successful podcast. It's growing 10% a year, which means logically I'm going to pay you 10% more next year. If you want to make 30% more, you've got to figure out a way to massively increase downloads and advertising revenue or subscriptions or newsletters, whatever it is. Or if you really want to make a step change in your productivity and your compensation, could you figure out a way to leverage new tools or AI to launch this podcast in Portuguese, Korean, and do something that we could go to 3 days a week without using the expensive resources, the talent? So I think it's just an honest conversation around, all right, you've either got to come up with ways to leverage these tools for more growth and more revenue or better metrics around what you do, or figure out that you're better at leveraging these tools than your colleague. But let's be honest, if it's just flat growth, we're going to use these tools to figure out that we need 3 of you, not 5 of you. And the hard part is what I'm seeing at business schools right now is that a lot of the entry-level banking and consulting, in the second year of business school, the majority, business school is basically for the elite and the aimless. It's for good kids who are smart, who hate their first job and want to find a different job, but want to make as much money. So I was an investment banker and I like the money, but I hated investment banking, so I'm going to go to consulting. And then there's all these consultants who are like, I love the money, but I hated consulting, so I'm going to go to banking. And it's funny that we don't talk to each other and say, hey, it sucks over here. But the entry level jobs, especially out of undergrad and business school for consulting and banking and kind of high end information age work, those jobs are really, they're not going away, but you kind of need 2 or 3, whereas you used to need 5. And so either their salaries are going to have to come back and come way down. The average compensation of an NYU Stern grad is 212,000. So either they come down to 150 grand and you try and figure out new things to do with them, or you tell them you've just got to become much more productive and we're going to need fewer of you. And their boss or the boss is the next layer up. It's going to be, all right, how do you use AI to launch new products, new markets, if you want to grow your compensation? So I think that with big companies, I mean, big companies have to be more sociopathic. They have to be able to stand in front of an all hands and lie and say everything's great the day before they tell 20% of the staff not to come in and call HR. I mean, you do have to be a bit of a sociopath to be a public company CEO. But I think if you're blessed with a smaller or medium-sized business, you task them with saying, okay, let's really try and lean into AI and see how we can grow our revenues now. We can all make more money. I try to appeal to people's greed glands.
Sure. No, but Jamie, it seems then Scott's not on public company boards. You're probably.
And I will defend Satya because I know him and he's not a sociopath.
But so you're probably more in these conversations at the public company board level, where you're advising and offering your insights and thoughts on how this hits the workforce. How do you think CEOs should be talking about this in terms of larger organizations and larger teams?
Well, I think Scott's exactly right about there is a hard, companies are figuring out how to do things more efficiently right now. And I would say that's not a quiet part. That is an active conversation that organizations are having. And I think it comes to kind of what we were starting with, Greg, about the transformation that we're under. And big disruptions basically create change in 2 ways. One is they allow us to get more efficient at things. And so we can do the same things faster, better. And then they also allow us to do new things in different ways. And then the hard part is because there's a lot less imagination required in doing things more efficiently, that's something that can happen faster. And so you see that companies are all like, yes, I want to do this faster. Of course, I want to do the same things faster. And then, and so what you see are companies trying to get ahead of that and think that through and how do we get very efficient at the things we know how to do? And the big challenge ahead of us, the real work, and I think, you think about this a lot with Section, for example, is how do we get ahead of the new things? What's coming down the pipe? And that's where opportunity gets created. But it happens slower.
And the transition seems where all the pain's in the transition, right? Or the time it takes, it's faster to cut than it is to create new, right? Using AI to innovate.
And then the pain is in the transition. And
Right.
I think Scott was hitting on that. And I would say, but it's one way to deal with it is cutting. Another one that you see from a lot of business leaders right now, and it would be interesting to get Scott's thoughts on this too, is thinking through reskilling, or how do you help people figure out to do new things? And Scott was talking a little bit about where, how the corporate ladder is changing and where do people go and where do they start? And I think it becomes really interesting then to start thinking about what kind of skills do we want people to have and how do we set them up to be successful and discover these new things, particularly when we're in the middle of so much change and the sort of traditional ladder, the ladders that we think about, the consulting ladder or the iBanking ladder or what, those are changing in really significant ways. And for us old people, that's scary. We're oh, we know this ladder and that's what we want to, to be successful, and trying to see what the new ladders, the new way.
Well, let's talk about those skills then, because you went there. What you talk about, Jamie, so these new skills, I think one of them you talk about is integrating as a new skill. Basically researching and creating goes away, and integrating, analyzing kind of come in as to, say more about that. What's that? And I'm not even sure what that means. What's analyzing, integrating mean as a skill?
Yeah, I mean, so it's worth thinking about what AI is really good at and what are the complementary human skills, which is sort of what's getting at that, AI is very good at learning patterns that exist in data, right? That's essentially what it is. It's existing, so like being able to find those patterns is something that you don't need necessarily, but can exist in the model. But being able to analyze and like find unexpected bridges and see things in new ways, that's really important. AI is actually really good at reward hacking too. So it's going to find the simplest pattern to define things. So you may have heard of this notion of reward hacking. It's especially given how reinforcement fine tuning is popular right now. That's basically this continuous learning loop that gets created where you have some sort of reward function and the model just continuously learns to maximize that reward function. But just like humans will maximize reward functions, and you see this, like actually you give your sales organization some target, they will do all sorts of weird things to hit that target. Similarly, an AI model will do all sorts of weird things to hit its target and learn stuff. You've probably seen these creepy videos about like teaching robots to walk using reinforcement learning. And like, you're like, oh, the goal is you want the robot to get from one place to another. And so it'll like learn how to like lurch forward in some ridiculous way. And so you have to get, and so then people go and improve the reward function. It's our job to think about both when the reward function is breaking, like when the model is learning something that's not what we want it to learn, and like to challenge the system. You also see this with the models and like how do we think critically about what we get and whether that's what we want.
So are we as workers, as humans, supposed to know enough to be able to manage the AIs in this way, meaning to compensate for reward function or compensate for hallucinations? Like as you're talking, I'm thinking it's hard to manage AI. And will these challenges go away, or is that a skill we're looking for in our new employees, that they actually know how to manage sort of the erratic behavior of their AIs?
This is another good example of that short-term, long-term thing that we were sort of talking about. In the short term, we have to learn how to manage like the pieces in the model. Like, yes, oh, is there like, it can be a lot harder actually to you ask a researcher or a reasoning model for some deep thinking on something. You're going to get a lot of content, and like it's a lot of work to actually go through that content and think about whether that is right. So in many ways, AI is actually increasing the metacognitive demand of a lot of what we do. Like it's actually really fun to like do simple things that like let you check off a box and be like, oh, I got that done today and I did this. It's hard to go think critically about something. So you see that increase in metacognitive demand. But in many ways, that's us trying to use AI in the old way, like in a traditional way, like a computer. AI is actually quite good at supporting a lot of that metacognitive work as well. And so when we start thinking about how to use language models for planning, for evaluation and looking at understanding content, for helping us, even like I really like using AI to think about how to help us express our intent. Right now, most of the way we use a language model is like a computer. We think we're going to go and tell the language model what to do. And like, great, now instead of saying create a pivot table, I can say, help me figure out my budget. That's lovely. But it's much more interesting to actually be like, oh, I want to figure out my budget. What should I actually be thinking about? Or what might be wrong with my budget? And like use it as a thought partner and actually get, set it up so that it will challenge your thinking and help you develop new intents or think about what you're trying to do in new ways.
So AI as thought partner to me seems like a kind of undervalued use case.
Yes, 100%. I'm all in there. Yes.
You are at any level employee.
Any level employee, any level human being,
Right.
like
Scott, are you using AI as a thought partner these days?
Oh, very much so. I'm constantly on podcasts when I have questions. I thought of something. I was on Pivot today, and Kara asked me, "Who do you think the Democratic nominee will be?" And it struck me. I said, "I don't think there's ever been a nominee in the last 100 years that's under 5'10", and that was a politically correct way of saying there's no way the Democrats are going to nominate a woman again. And I typed in, "Has there been a president under 5'10" in the last 100 years?" And the answer was no. And Truman was close. Debate over whether it's 5'9" or 5'10". But I use it, or I said, give me historical references for what's going on in LA, especially German ones, because I like them because they're scarier. And so it gives me a ton of great content, but I still have to frame it. It's like it gives me a lot of chips, but I still think humans are the salsa, if you will. The way the way I'm just trying to think about something that's actionable. I'm watching the chat, and I think it's a lot of what I'll call mid-level managers. Um, and that is, I'll give you a dark side and an optimistic side. So this is like the East German Stasi with Wi-Fi. I can upload all the email and Slack interactions I have with an employee and say, give me an estimate of how many hours a week this person is actually working. And it'll give me what I believe, maybe incorrectly, but I believe, and that's all that's important, is my perception of how many hours a week this person is actually working. I can upload a bunch of podcasts, including competitive podcasts, and say, how is my sound engineering relative to the other sound engineering? That is what you're up against. Now, the good news is if you are genuinely in the top 10%, people are going to figure that out really fast. If you're really good, this is really good news for you. America has essentially been optimized for the top 10%. Essentially America over the last 50 years has transitioned to an economy where you use the body 90% as a nutrition bag to make the top 10% wealthier and wealthier. And AI kind of speedballs that. AI is going to take the top 10% who work really hard and are really creative and know how to leverage these tools and just make them fucking warriors. I mean, they're just going to be monsters. And what we don't talk about is AI will also be used as an incredibly robust benchmark and also for surveillance of employees. It's going to be able to figure out pretty fast if you're walking your dog every afternoon in the park. It'll literally be able to come back and say, this person is clearly not available for work during these hours because they're doing something else. It'll figure that out really fast. It'll also figure out that this person is exceptionally creative, working very hard, and is a good manager. You can upload your dialogue with your direct reports and say, give me feedback relative to my peers on whether I'm a good manager and what I could do to be a better manager. So the way I would think of it, if I'm a mid-level manager, is everyone says the importance of mentors. I would use this as a mentor, and that is I would say, here are all the emails and Slacks and back and forth and my compensation review and my job review between me and my manager. One, how is my compensation relative to peers at other companies? Two, does this person seem emotionally invested in my success? I think that's the key attribute of a company is having someone who's emotionally invested in your success. The bottom line is being liked is ridiculously fucking important, regardless of how professional your company is. And also, am I learning and progressing? Do you get the sense my skills are growing? And this person, unlike a mentor where you have to be politically correct and they don't want to upset you or offend you, you can be really, really honest with this thing, right? I'm having sex with a coworker. Do you think other people have figured that out? You can ask AI that, and it'll tell you. You're not going to ask your mentor that. So, not that I'm suggesting that's a good or a bad idea. So I would think of this thing as an incredibly powerful mentor. And anytime you have questions about your career, how you're doing, how you upscale, your compensation, what other firms your skills might be good at, if I were at Google right now, I'd be uploading everything and saying, am I about to get a letter telling me to be laid off, that I'm about to be laid off? Right? Does my boss seem actually invested in my success based on our interactions and his or her tone? Am I having trouble as a manager? Am I failing? I think you can I would just literally try and take all ego out of yourself and start asking the most transparent, thoughtful questions about where you get purpose of work, what you're looking for, and how you're doing, and ask for help. And also, I would benchmark it against a second AI because they get it wrong all the time. But what I find when Anthropic and OpenAI come back and say, Scott, you're too profane in class and it diminishes your credibility, I have no choice but to listen. So you use the term.
And do they both say that?
They both say that consistently.
Okay.
Also, they say if I want to bring my blood pressure down, I need to stop. I need to drink much less. But fuck it, it's just AI.
Right.
So, but my point is, we always talk about it as thought partner. Yeah, that's great. Where I think it's really underutilized is people who are managing their own careers. People don't take enough responsibility for their own career. They're expecting that the organization or someone above them is going to take responsibility for their career. Really think, okay, this is the ultimate mentor for me, and upload everything that happens to you to the extent it's allowed by your company and start asking a series of questions. right? How vulnerable am I right now, right? Am I in a position to negotiate substantially more compensation? And if so, based on the fact that these are their interactions with my boss, what is the best tone I should use to have that conversation? And you may decide to ignore that, but it gives you really interesting thoughts. I really find but make sure you do it with two LLMs.
Yeah, that and Scott, I think you got to also be sitting down maybe with a drink. Like, I mean, we do that at Section, and we've got people I know have done that. AI is pretty brutal, pretty direct. To your point,
Yeah.
right? It's pretty honest. Uh, Jamie, how do we?
Especially ChatGPT. Anthropic's more politically correct.
Yeah,
It starts
Anthropic's a
telling
little
you that
more.
you have value and all this other bullshit.
Right, right. Jamie, how should we manage that relationship with our AIs when it's giving us this kind of advice? How do you think we should approach that?
Oh, well, I will just say that is like that AI as a mentor is a great example of AI as a thought partner. It is helping you figure it out. And I would even say, like, it's lovely to listen to Scott suggest the kinds of questions that you should be asking. And it prompts me. I'm like, oh, that's an interesting question, or that's another way. And you see a bunch of companies, both large and small, leaning into the sort of coaching
Yep.
concept of how do you help
Yep.
coach people to do a better job. One of the things that I think is actually useful, even to sort of go a level meta on that, is actually the AI can be quite useful in thinking about what questions should I ask. And right now we're doing that via prompting, but to get back to this whole reinforcement fine tuning that we were talking about earlier, I think the sort of step function, there's sort of this interesting we talk a lot about one of the things I hear, like this notion of like, oh, model forward, and like, new companies are model forward and they're going to build, like, yes, rather than trying to do in some deterministic way, figure out how to mentor you, we can go create something that will help tell you, like, oh, ask about what I should be doing better. Or, when you start thinking though about real AI native, you're actually embedding that learning back into the model. So you're not just doing it via prompting, but you're actually creating a reward function that is like, I want to be successful in my career. You can start embedding your values into that reward function and then start figuring out how to learn that. And that's when it actually becomes like it's starting to help you with the really complex metacognitive stuff. And you're not having to be like, what questions should I ask? How do I figure that out? But it's really a partner in helping you achieve your goals and where you're trying to get at. And that's an example of sort of the path we're on right now, where it's like, first we get the model and we try to do all the deterministic things. We're like, how tall was the last president? And then we start trying to do some of these more thought partnery things, like, what should I be doing to improve my career? What risks are ahead of me? And then we get to a place where it's really, you can start figuring out how you're getting towards your goals.
Yeah, I want to circle back to the future of work, or the impact of all these technologies on work. We've talked about, Scott, you talked about entry-level jobs obviously being impacted. Jamie, you've talked about new skills that are needed. What else is going to go on? Like, let's use a 3-year time horizon. I don't want to use 10 years. I don't want to use next month. Scott, you think this is mostly about laying people off in the short term to pay for it. But the next 2 or 3 years, our team's going to shrink. Our role's going to change that much. Are new jobs really going to be created? Like, let's make some predictions. Jamie, you start.
Okay. I think in the next 3 years is forever right now. So like in the forever horizon, I think we're going to start seeing right now, the way we think about AI is actually very individual focused. And that's been what we've been talking around. Like, how does it help me think better? How am I going to achieve my goals? I think we're going to start seeing more, and like, even when we think about the organizational impacts, it's a little bit more like just how do I run leaner or do my things, but I think we're going to start seeing real shifts to teams, how groups work together, how people collaborate, and also how organizations are structured. And so like you're seeing the start of like, how is an organization structured in people trying, companies I don't believe aren't like driving this efficiency just to do this nothing. They're doing it to be able to invest in new areas, but they're figuring out what those new areas are. So I think there's a lot about how groups work together coming.
Yeah, and then Scott, if someone came to you and said, "Listen, sure, I want to cut costs, but I also want to create something new." Like, what about this idea of using AI to innovate and grow, as opposed just to cut costs? I mean, are you Are you open-minded at least if you're on a board, or you're like, hey, I'm not interested. Just cut costs, be more efficient, call me in a year. Or are you interested in new product ideas, or new markets and new businesses that AI could create?
Oh, sure. If you look at, I mean, I have a talk called The AI Optimist, and that is my general prediction, or on a meta level, is that if you look at every technology, automation was supposedly going to put 80% of the global automobile employment force out of work. And there was some job destruction on the factory floor from automation in the short run, but we couldn't anticipate heated seats or car stereos. And now there's more people working in the global auto industry than before. Every technology that comes along, generally, there's some catastrophizing about job destruction. But if it creates productivity, you have additional profits to reinvest in other, more interesting places. And like I've said, I think over the medium and long term, AI is going to create more jobs than it's going to destroy. Because if you think about the opportunities for AI and healthcare, helping, niche LLMs that help mothers with kids with diabetes. A mother whose child suffers from diabetes spends 5 months of her year managing that child's diabetes between specialists, prescriptions, arguing with her insurance company. So there'll be an LLM or opportunities just to serve mothers with kids with type 2 diabetes. And we'll give her 2 months, 2 of those months back in exchange for two, 300, 500, $1,000 a year that maybe even the insurance company will cover. So I just think there's going to be a ton of interesting little niche applications and businesses at the much bigger end or higher end. So I'm optimistic. I don't see any reason why this wouldn't follow. We always say it's different this time. I don't see any reason why this technology wouldn't ultimately follow the cadence of every other technology, some short-term job destruction, and then over the long term, it frees up so much time and capital to invest in other types of unique offerings that are needed.
Scott, this seems to be faster though. I have a little bit of a hard time with the Industrial Revolution analogy or the car manufacturing analogy, just in terms of the pace of that seemed to be, slower. Those transitions were longer, so we had more time. Don't you sense this is happening just that much faster?
Well, I see your point, Greg, and I get it's gone from amoeba to T-Rex really fast, and it's going to get even faster. But personally, I think GLP-1 technology is having more impact on the actual ground right now. I mean, I use AI, it's great, but I have friends who are no longer obese. It's had a
Right.
much bigger impact on their
Sure.
lives than AI. I think the whole AI market is so ridiculously overvalued. I wouldn't invest in AI right now just because I think it's really outstanding. I think it's, getting better faster. I think it'll be used for all sorts of stuff, but I don't, I don't, I don't see it. I don't think it's going to have quite the impact that people think in the short run. At least I look at my life. I'm still interacting with my kids the same way. I'm still producing podcasts. I'm still going out. I'm still drinking too much. I'm still paying to get on planes to go drink rosé in the south of France. I mean, yeah, okay. And we've been talking about AI for a few years now, and I use it a lot. I like it, but I think some of the catastrophizing or Brave New World stuff is a little strange. I would also argue that I think that AI is not going to create the same amount of shareholder value for a small number of companies. And that is, if you think about search or social or e-commerce, a very small number of companies were able to sequester trillions of dollars in shareholder value through IP distribution, capital allocation. And everyone's been wondering who that's going to be. Is it Microsoft that adds the most market cap, or Meta, or OpenAI, or NVIDIA? And I wonder if this industry is more like the airline industry or PCs. Now, what do I mean by that? I think the most transformative technology in my life is the technology that lets me skirt along the surface of the atmosphere at 8/10 the speed of sound to be with other people and do amazing things. That technology has way more impact on my life than AI or semiconductors or even the iPhone. And yet, if you added up all the profits and losses of Airbus, Boeing, and every manufacturer of jets and all the airlines, I think they're at best at break even. because no one or two companies was ever able to sequester the value. I was on the board of Gateway Computer. I bought 17% of the company for $70 million. We were the second largest PC manufacturer in the world. Think about the incredible unlock of PC technology because no PC company was able to sequester and capture value. So the winner was all of us. The winner of the PC and jet manufacturing revolution was all of us. No one small set of companies was able to sequester it, that value or capture that value. And since DeepSeek, I've sort of flipped the mind, and I'm wondering if over time, if the winner from AI is all of us, and that there's not going to be very many companies that manage multi-trillion-dollar share gains, that the real winner is that the technology is going to kind of seep into the general public. Because if DeepSeek can come out with something like it's the old Navy of AI, right? 80% of OpenAI for 50% or 10% of the price. I'm just beginning to think now that maybe OpenAI doesn't offer the same economic upside for a small number of companies, but it'll substantially increase the productivity of all of us of PCs. But long-winded way of saying, I don't think, I agree with you, there's going to be a lot of job destruction in the short run, but I think over the long run, I think it's going to create more jobs.
So Jamie, I'm not going to ask you to respond to that. I'm going to ask you to answer this question. Advice to parents. Advice to parents with kids in high school and college. We get this question all the time. What's the one course they should be taking, or what's the one course you think high school should be offering today, or what's the one skill you want this kid to have coming out of college? And Scott, I'll ask you the same.
Great. So I actually have 3 kids in college and one who's a senior in high school right now. So this is honestly a question that's on my mind a lot. And I would say I believe strongly in a broad education. Like we're in a time of really significant disruption. So being able to, and you talk about, like, I think there's sort of a dual to the conversation you and Scott were just having. Like technology follows patterns, and we know that. And it is even technology in the past has been disruptive, and then this is one that's happening globally and very fast. Like, it is important that we be able to deal with ambiguity, be able to figure things out. Ironically, people are like, "Oh, do you want all your kids to study computer science?" And I actually have my kids studying philosophy. Actually, one of my kids is at NYU, Scott. He's in the liberal studies core, like thinking very, very broadly. So I think that's. Although that being said, I think the scientist mindset offers us a lot. And there I don't mean just being able to experiment and develop hypotheses and try things out, although that's certainly an important part of it. It is being able to read the literature and build on what's available. It's being able to validate your hypotheses and challenge things. So I think there's, I actually think science is a very creative endeavor as well. So I don't mean only study the humanities. I mean, think broadly and creatively about the world.
The kid that's in high school, would you consider a trade school? I mean, how do you think about this idea of?
No, so I'm actually I guess I'm saying almost the opposite of trade school. Like,
say it again?
I'm saying the opposite of trade school in some ways. That
right.
Trades are getting disrupted. Specific expertise is being disrupted. So I actually think that.
Yeah, I guess I meant more trades like plumbers and electricians.
So we haven't seen a disruption yet in the physical world as much, but like that's a hard one to predict in there, when that particular disruption is coming.
Scott, I know you have a kid thinking about college, presumably not a trade school, but a college.
Yeah, I agree with what Jamie said. And congrats on your son at NYU, Jamie. It must be very impressive. We artificially constrained scarcity to feel good about ourselves. So the fact that he got in is very impressive. It's a very difficult school to get into now. Look, if I could get my kids any skill, I don't think it's computer science or Mandarin. Wherever Tony private schools in New York go, avoid those new subjects, right? I mean, we're going to have these in our ears. You're not going to need, you learn a language or you learn music, not to play in a rock band or be able to move to China and make money. You do it to expand your brain and use it for other things. And I think it's terrible we replaced civics with computer science. That's how you get Mark Zuckerberg. So I think the sciences are really important, basic, reading, just the basic stuff. If I had it to do again, I would have taken more biology and more English courses. But if I could give my kids any one skill and where I really focus, and it's so hard to predict where the puck is headed, but the place I'm pretty sure, when I leave the house with my kids, I force them, I won't let them back in the house unless they open. And what does that mean? They have to talk to a stranger. And even if it's just going up and petting their dog or talking to someone in line, my oldest has no problem with it. My youngest sometimes sits outside the house crying until he finds somebody to talk to. Because the ability to communicate and have the confidence to look people in the eyes and create a narrative and an arc is key to scoring above your weight class professionally and romantically. That's the key to life. You need to make a lot of money and you need to find a great partner. And your ability to craft a wonderful story, whether it's over text or a card or a note, or stand in front of a group of people and tell them why they should invest $10 million in your crazy idea, or to convince someone that you'd be an interesting person to hang out with, that is everything. You don't want to be the person who's always right, muttering under their breath, but can't move people to action. You'd rather be wrong and able to convince people than right and not able to convince people. So having a really good rep, being able to communicate well, to write well. I try to get my sons to write. It's very difficult because I think most great communicators start with write. I write a book every 18 months because I think it all starts, because I think the written word is really difficult. And if you can craft an argument cogently with strong grammar, you want to be successful, read Strunk and White 7 times. That's what I did, Elements of Style. And then force yourself to stand in front of people and figure out your communications medium. Go up to strangers at parties, go up to strange people you're romantically interested in, and try and open, get used to rejection, get used to communicating, get used to humor, get used to being social. So I think that is the key. Show me someone who's made a lot of money, and I'm either going to show you someone who's freakishly genius, and you should assume you're not that person, or I'm going to show you someone who has an ability to inspire other people to action and gets put in a room of opportunities, even when they're not in that room, because they're so likable. And the reason they're so likable, that they're so attractive, is because they have an unbelievable, uncanny ability to communicate. So if I could give my sons anything, it's the ability to open and engage people in all different types of formats and mediums.
And you also said earlier, they need to be in the top 10% or something like that, right? That's what you said. The knowledge workers will need to be in the top 10%.
Yeah, well, let me put it this way. If you're in the top 10%, you're going to make 5 to 10x more than the people in the
Right.
bottom 90. I mean, this is the
Right.
cruel, you need the bottom 90. Let me just
Right.
tell you how I think. I'm not saying how CEOs think. You need the bottom 90 because you need to scale. My attitude is, but the top 10% add 120% of the value, and the bottom 90 are negative 20, but you need them. And so I was trying to identify the top 10% of my companies and wildly overcompensate them. And I think that is loosely what's happening in the corporate world, is there's a small group of people like Jamie, or someone at some point identified Jamie as the chief scientist as being a superstar. And they sat her down and said, "You're going to make so much fucking money if you stay here, Jamie." And everybody else makes a good living, but they don't make as much. The world is going to the top 10, if not the top 1%. And AI is going to help managers just figure that out faster. So I just think everything's becoming more, America is becoming more like itself every day. And that is, it's just an exceptional time to be freakishly good at what you do. It's a terrible time to be average. My dad used to say after he moved to America, America's a terrible place to be stupid. I think what he meant by that was the social safety net and the notion of UBI and making sure everyone has a job. That's just not very American. And I think it's getting more and more,
For sure. No, whatever.
more and
And
more bipolar.
as a Canadian coming to the US, my point of view was the first day I arrived was that this place believes in Darwin and Canada does not. Jamie, is the hope that, am I naive or delusional here, or too optimistic, thinking that maybe with AI, people can become exceptional if they couldn't have before? There, we have natural abilities, we have good education, we have good mentoring, but maybe we'll find new exceptional people because they're able to leverage these skills and technologies themselves, AI specifically, to kind of make themselves exceptional. Are you seeing any evidence of that? Meaning, new star performers are emerging in teams because they know how to use AI.
Well, I mean, there's many answers to that on like different time scales and in different ways. I would say like all of the early studies of sort of AI and productivity and the impact it was having was this sort of compression of capabilities, actually, where you're seeing low performers who can't write well all of a sudden can write something well, poor developers who can't program well can
Right.
program
Right.
reasonably. And that shows up in like the laboratory studies. And that's sort of true. Like there is sort of a compression in that way, but then it's sort of what we've been talking about. Then it starts being, how do you unlock new things and think about new ways? And that's why the skills we're talking about um, matter, and that conversation we were just having, and how do you unlock. And so some of the more recent studies on productivity, in particular when you look at it in real world contexts, or in particular in collaborative contexts, how groups work together, you see actually that it starts differentiating more as well. So you see there was this recent study, for example, looking at teamwork with AI. And one thing that jumped out of that in particular was that teams working with AI were like twice as likely to produce exceptional outcomes, get two times the value. So I think that's certainly something we have to think. Like I think we're going to start seeing exceptional value, and that's going to show up a bunch of places.
Are we worried about getting addicted to it like we did social media? Are we worried about sort of cognitively offloading everything to AI? Scott, is this one of your concerns that
Well, we already are addicted, just for what it's worth. Like AI shows up. So there's sort of the human level and the societal level. Like in some ways, when Scott was saying, I don't see AI, I don't use AI that much. It's like, but I love to fly. His planes are flown via AI. I mean, and this is sort of like, it is at the fabric of every time you go to the doctor, that's being enabled by AI. So like, we are reliant on it. It is structural. I think there's a different question of like, any technology influences, like we use the technology and influence the technology, but it influences us and how we work together. And like, I think that's what you're really getting at. And that's an important question. And this is, this relates directly to the skill question you were asking. Like when you think about what skills you're learning, like you get a calculator, you don't have to learn how to do the exact math pieces anymore, but there's value in understanding how to do the math. And actually, like, I found it super interesting when my kids were little, what they learned, and there's actually even value to memorization. There's something that like laying down those cognitive pathways in your brain is really important. But like what they learned how to do, because they have calculators, was they learned how to do good estimates, and they had to understand whether the answer they were getting when they did something was the right order of magnitude for them to get something done. So like these skills, handwriting is a skill we don't need to know, but fine motor skills, like that requires planning and get hand-eye coordination and all these important things. So you don't need to learn handwriting, but you can do cooking, and so like, and this is important, like this is really important. I think it lies at the like base of what Scott was saying, is AI is changing very fast. And there's a lot of stuff around us that's changing very fast, but what it means to be human is like foundational, and that is not changing. And like really leaning into that is sort of what's ahead for us.
Yep. Including making so Scott, you don't let the kids leave the front stoop. What's the deal? Can you explain that again? Your kids can't do what until they've done what?
I don't let them back in the house
Oh,
until
back
they've
in the house.
opened
Right.
with one.
Right.
All they have to do is talk to one
Got it.
stranger.
All right.
It
Okay.
can be, but
Yeah.
just to Jamie's point, the downside of AI, the risks. I don't think it's going to become sentient, decide to kill us. A drone army of super self-healing weapons is a possibility, but we should be able to leverage AI for defensive measures definitely as offensive measures. Income inequality is a huge problem, but that's nothing new. That's a decision we've made. We've made our strategy in the US is income inequality. We keep cutting taxes. We've cut them under Democratic and Republican administrations. Like income inequality is a conscious decision that we've made, not some the illusion of complexity that it's happening on its own is total bullshit that the incumbents uses propaganda such that the entrants don't come for them and kill them and take their shit away. The misinformation, quite frankly, the misinformation probably hasn't been as bad as we were worried about. It's been bad, but it hasn't been much worse. We're not all in this haze of not knowing what's going on, or at least not any more than we were a couple of years ago. It could get worse. It's a big problem. I'm not discounting it. The biggest risk of AI that people don't talk about is loneliness. And that is we're mammals. We're supposed to lie on each other. We're supposed to interact. We're supposed to argue. We're supposed to touch each other. We're supposed to get along, not get along, navigate friendships, navigate the pecking order, figure out how to read a room in a company. And I worry that a lot of young people, specifically young men who I think a lot about, that the deepest pocketed, most talented companies in the world with godlike technology are all trying to convince young people, especially young men, that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen with an algorithm. And that is why go through the effort of trying to find friends when I can go on Reddit or Discord and using AI, I can find people with the same niche interests as me. Why go through the hassle of putting on a tie and showing up to work and being presentable and not getting high every night when I can get a job at or trade stocks and crypto on Robinhood or Coinbase and have some hallucination that I'm learning or investing when you're not, you're gambling. Why would I go through the humiliation of trying to look nice and showering and working out and enduring rejection and coming up with a plan and communicating kindness and demonstrating excellence and showing resilience when I have porn? And I think AI is just going to make all this shit worse. I think it's going to sequester. I think we are developing at the hands of AI and companies that really don't care about the public, are focused on shareholder value, which is what they're supposed to do, that we are evolving a new asocial, asexual species of young males that will wake up at 30, having had no real intimate relationships with friends, mentors, or mates, and be anxious, obese, and depressed.
You're
So-
killing me. You're killing me right now, because this is supposed to be about the future of work, and I know what's happening in chat. They're like, Greg, you didn't keep control of this conversation. This guy's back to loneliness.
I think it's the first time we've had a meaningful conversation, Greg.
I think it's an important conversation, Scott.
I think just back, okay, let's bring it back to work. For those of you who are young on the phone or on this line, get into the office. The office are feature, not a bug. Bounce off of people, go up to people, ask them for coffee, ask them out, ask them to be your mentor. Yeah, I'm telling you, remote work is a fucking disaster for young people. Nothing wonderful is going to happen to you on a screen, ever.
Jamie, I'm gonna let you wrap us up. You've got 4 boys. They're about to join the knowledge economy as they graduate. Again, what's your advice for them and for the rest of us in terms of as parents or as and most of the audience is, as Scott said, most of the audience here today are team leaders managing younger people and trying to prepare them for this moment, which is a moment in which AI is starting to do parts of their job. Take us home here with some advice.
Well, and I'll tie it in, and I'll tie AI back into the future of work as well, in that this is the future of, like, right now we're looking at AI in an individual context. And I think the interesting, exciting thing is how AI helps us collaborate better and how technology helps us collaborate better. And so, there's collaboration and working with people is like, that's how we generate new ideas on this call. I now think of things a little bit differently, and those conversations we're having with other people are really important. And I think the opportunity and the thing we're going to see right now is, how does AI enable us to work together better, have more interesting conversations, and create a new world where we want our children to grow up into and work.
Awesome. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Pleasure.
Thank everybody else around the world for tuning in. Thank you, guys.